we will allow comparison, we'll allow negativity, we'll just start, all of these inputs to your brain will start to come together. And then you're like trying to sort through all of them. And so instead of getting frustrated and allowing all that to come in, what is one thing you can focus on? You guys call it like the next best step.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-hosts DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
Welcome to the Limitless Minds podcast. I'm here today, unfortunately, without our esteemed co-host, DJ Eitzen, as he's traveling, but we were so geeked to get some time with Iris Zimmerman that we didn't want the opportunity to slip away. Today, I'm thrilled to have Iris on the show. Iris is not only an Olympian and U.S. Fencing Hall of Fame inductee, but also a brilliant performance coach who has leveraged the power of mindset and performance psychology throughout her remarkable journey. From becoming the first U.S. fencing world champion at 14 to an NCAA champion at Stanford and making the 2000 Olympic team. Now she is lead specialist at Deloitte in performance psychology. Not to mention, she is the co-host of an awesome podcast called Untrained. She has an amazing perspective on mindset and peak performance development, and I can't wait to share her with you. Enjoy. All right, Iris, thanks for joining the Limitless Minds podcast. I'm really excited to catch up with you, share, some of your perspective, your knowledge, you got game, and I've been following you for a long time. You've done a number of things with Limitless Minds over the course of our experience as an organization. So we have a lot of respect for you and have been eager to share you and your knowledge with the audience. But, and today we don't have DJ. Like, what a bummer. I know he's jealous. He had to do some last minute travel, but we didn't want to miss the opportunity to chat with you. So I get the luxury of spending the time today. But how you been?
It's been good. And also I'm so excited to connect with you and the organization, you and DJ. I love your vibes. I love what you guys are about and what you're helping the world to do. So, as I said before, anytime I can support you or be a part of this, I always say yes and yes.
I love it. Well, what's most funny? I was thinking about this morning, for so many of us, we'll turn on the TV or read an article or, see a clip on social media of like some young child genius who's like doing something special, right? Or like some savant in whatever sport or music or whatever dance, whatever it might be. And you kind of turn to somebody you're watching with or reading with and you're like, hey, what were you doing at 14 years old or 15 years old? And I remember that for me when I was watching like Coco Gauff, for example, right? I think she was 15. Maybe 2019 when she beat Venus Williams, who happened to be, of course, like her childhood idol in Wimbledon. And I remember turning to Courtney, my wife, and being like, yo, like, what were you doing at 15 years old? Like, were you playing in Wimbledon? No. Right. And so like, we always have these little interactions when we see stuff like this. And that, in many ways, that was kind of you. You were the first U.S. fencing world champion at 14 years old, right? And winning the world championships U17s. And so like, I just want to start there because we're going to get into, some of your background, your history and everything. But like, I really want to know a little bit about your early years, right? And like, how do you kind of rapidly ascend to something like that so young? And so tell us a little bit about the family, the background, the environment and how you got there.
Yeah, that's always a fun conversation, right? Like people will be like, oh, when I was growing up, we did this and this. And I was like, yeah, well, I flew to Paris. I won a world championship. Got thrown up in the air, had to come back and go to 8th or 9th grade or whatever it was. So it is a different lifestyle, right? Like you choose that. But in some ways, people who have immigrant parents will understand this. Like there is an intensity to being the first generation child that I don't know if everyone appreciates, but there's this intensity of like, I've left everything I've ever done, burned all the boats, and I've come here for you. And so now you've got to make some stuff happen. So my mother, it's not an exaggeration to say that she was a tiger mom as a Chinese mom. It wasn't like she knew if we were going to try to get to college in the United States, we need a scholarship. So my sister, who's 5 years older than me, also a 2-time Olympian, we both went to Stanford. I mean, my mother is not playing around.
She's not. She's playing no games. Playing no games.
No game. I always tell her, I'm like, I don't know how you did it. I don't even have an energy to like parent mediocre children. I don't even know about like 2 children that go to Stanford and then make an Olympic team. But, she knew we had to go do a sport. So my sister, being the guinea pig and being older, she did all the sports and then landed on fencing. And the coach saw something in me. And also my mother was like, I am not driving 2 kids to 2 different sports. You can forget about it. So you're doing this too. Yeah. And thankfully, I also had that drive. So I made it too. But that's what it takes, right? Like it takes someone to say, it takes a couple of things. It takes at that young age, a parent to say, all right, let's invest in this kid to do this, right? And putting a ton of parental energy into it. Then it takes a coach to see you, right? Like it takes them to be like, all right, like I see that you can do this, and then invest the time. Then it takes you, right? It takes you to be like, all right, I'm kind of good at this. I'm going to keep investing my time into it. Yeah. There are consequences to that, which we can get into, but in the very beginning, that's what it takes. It takes all of those people to say, gosh, this kid's got something, or this could be something. And then it takes you, right? At the end of the day, it takes you to be like, all right, I really enjoy it. I really like it. I'm going to do it. And the want to do that.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, like, I won't call Tammy Wilson a tiger mom per se, but she had tiger-ish qualities, you know what I mean? And so did my dad, right? So like we came from a family of like excellence was kind of like the standard, right? Now, so my mom, who's still living, and my dad who unfortunately passed away in 2010. My mom, I asked my mom a lot about like, I wish I could go back and be a fly on the wall with raising these children, because you have me, the oldest, who ended up playing 2 sports in college, and then more meaningfully, like 2 other siblings that have played some of the highest levels, right?
Yeah.
So she's got a son who's played in the NFL for 13 years, and that journey from little league and like pee wee football to like the NFL and big stages, to a daughter who's really her favorite child, by the way, Anna.
You just want to point that out.
Undoubtedly, and probably deservedly so, the favorite child, but like they're role dogs, right? And so Anna was 12 when dad passed away, so like she my mom had to take on all of that kind of pressure to make sure Anna's got everything built for her to succeed. And so, but she went to your alma mater, she went to Stanford, right, and played basketball. And so I kind of was able to watch from the sideline, quite literally, her journey. But like living in a family where like excellence is required, right? And of course I was the other kid, the black sheep who didn't make it to those levels. But like, just living in a family like that, I mean, there's a lot of pressure. And you mentioned, I want to get right into some of what you just, one word you just said, the consequences, right?
Yep.
Because, I have, we're both parents, I have kids, my oldest is 12 and a half, 13, almost 13 years old. She's competing at a high level in particularly in one sport, field hockey. She plays multiple, but, we're kind of, as a parent, you start getting caught up in like, so you signed the dotted line on like this travel league or this club team. Mm-hmm. And because, your kid loves the sport and you want to get them involved. And then like, once you've signed that, now you've like, feel like you sold your soul to like every commitment, and because, you kind of get caught up in comparing like, okay, what is that, what is that family doing? Are they going to that tournament? Are they investing in this? And so you just end up doing more and more and more and putting your kid into stuff like, so I'm just, I'm kind of eager as a parent to learn a little about some of these consequences and how we kind of, and what some of the things you learned around it, and what were the kind of ripple effects of those things,
Someone, I have a podcast too, and the woman on the podcast is also recently talking about toxic productivity. And one of the concepts she has is bartering achievement for belonging. Meaning like it felt like I needed to achieve to belong and to be a part of something, to be a part of the American culture, to be a part of something, to have attention from people, to have love and to have care. And my parent isn't like, my mother's wonderful, but there definitely was like, be a good kid, do the things. And then the signaling was more like, if I achieve these things, then she would care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or my coach. And he was also someone that, and I've talked about this before, very emotionally abusive, very abusive physically. So same thing, like you are bartering achievement for belonging and attention and care.
Yeah.
Like people will care about me if I'm successful. People will care about me if I'm achieving something. If people see that I'm successful, then they'll like me, right? So
oftentimes you're not even making that story up in your head. Oftentimes, like
Nope.
that's truly how it's treated. It's not like you're like coming up with these stories in your head. Truly, from language to from what people say and how they respond to how they act post achievement, it validates that feeling, right? Yeah. So you're not even making this up. This is actually literally how it goes,
100%, right? So everything is validated from the outside, right? Like you went to Stanford and you have all these things and you do all these things. They were great things, but then they sort of just reinforce, like if I try to burn myself out to do these things, if I forget what I want and the things that I want, then I'm going to achieve. So that's the real extreme end of that energy. But when you come back to like kids and the sports today, I think it's like one thing is choice, right? So I think one of the things I never felt was a sense of like, I don't want to do this, or I'm not feeling this, or it was always a push, always a grind. So I think one of them is like always reinforcing to your kid, you always have the choice to do this or not, to play field hockey or not. And why are you making this choice? Not just like you have the choice, but like, are you making this choice because you want to know how good you can be at field hockey? You want to push yourself, you want to drive yourself. And I think the other option, the other part of it too, is in absence of you doing field hockey, I'm just using this as an example. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you do field hockey or not. You're still part of this family. You still belong in this family, and we still love you for who you are. And I think it's not that my mother doesn't, but I don't think that was ever a conversation that was reinforced of like, hey, you have a choice. And also, if you don't do this, it's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay, and we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I'm not going to date you, right? But it was also a different time. You know what I mean? But it was a different time, like in a time of which we were the same, like we were the same class, I Bleav, like, same class in college. So like, in fact, I should have gone to Stanford to play baseball. I took the visit out there and I don't know what I was thinking, but, so we could have been classmates,
that would have been fun.
I might have failed out of school, but we could have been classmates for a minute. No, but like, it's, it's a different time, different time now, our kids, even my sister, who's 14 years younger than me, she kind of requires a different level of like communication around kind of their mental fitness and wellness. Right.
Yes.
And those kind of expectations are set a little differently, the mental component of, how, whether you're a youth athlete, from Pee Wee to pro, if you will, how the coach is a little different. I posted something, earlier this week around Rick Pitino, barking at his team in an really old school way that I think you and I probably recognize as like normal. But maybe not so many people today. They probably see it as maybe abusive, but you've probably seen abusive at a different level, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting. I mean, I think one thing I've been trying to work on with Gracie in particular, because I'm like, I have expectations too, right? But I've realized with Gracie, like, she scores a lot of goals, right? She's typically a kind of a leading scorer type, right? And when she would come off after a great game, I'd be like, hey, I'm proud of you, because I'm thinking that's the right thing to say to her in that moment, right? I'm proud of you. Like, of course, like I would want my dad to say they're proud of me. Then I realized that like she was attaching me being proud to like her having a good game or a bad game. I think I was saying I was proud of her, even if she didn't score, if they didn't win. Maybe, I don't know, right? But like I noticed that like when I switched that language to I'm happy for you, right? When she had especially when she played her absolute best, instead of saying I'm proud, like I'm happy for you, and then telling her I'm proud of her when I catch her doing the right behaviors, like kind of the work, like the tough work, like like it's kind of shifted my relationship with her from an athletic component, right? And I'm hoping that I can sustain that. I'm hoping that that's working. It's hard to know in the moment, but it's something I'm kind of really cognizant of right now to try to shift that, that achievement attachment, you know what I mean, in a way. And so we'll see how it goes, but
yeah, no, I think it's a trial and error thing for a parent. And I love that you're trying different things or even recognizing. I think like that's the pathway as a parent is you're not going to get it right, but at least you're trying like hard to be like, all right, did what I say in this moment, is it going to help or hurt them? Isra Nasser, the woman I talked about with the toxic productivity, she did say like asking asking the child if they're proud of themselves instead of reinforcing of like, I feel proud of you. Cause I do the same thing as you. I was like, oh, maybe I got to change what I'm saying. And then also if I say I'm proud of them all the time, it's going to lose its meaning. Right. Like, when do I use that? How do I use it? So I think it's always this, trying to have that communication. So that's the difference, right? My mom didn't really communicate. She did the best she could with what she had and supported, and it was a different era, and what was allowed was a very different era. So I think, but again, I think for a parent, the idea is know your role, right? Like know what you're there to do for your child. You're there to support them. You're not there to do it for them. You're not there to push them all the time. Like that's just, what is your role as a parent? We used to, at the fencing club, when I owned the fencing club, we used to have to sit down the parents and, talk to them because they need a place too. Cause you're nervous too. They're like, oh my God, I'm sitting on the end of the fencing strip and I have all this energy and all this adrenaline and the kid is like yelling at me and there are all these things happening. Like, what do I do? So the parents need help too, right? And some guidance. And so just to think that we know everything as a parent, that's a fallacy. We need each other. We need to make mistakes. We need to ask ourselves questions.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Actually, you mentioned something. You said when you own the fencing club. So, and just from our previous conversations from way back when, like, check me if I'm wrong, but like, didn't you guys end up buying the fencing club that you were a part of as a kid? Am I making that up?
No, you're not making that up. We bought so after I was done with the Olympic Games in 2008 and I didn't make the team, I was kind of like, I work with athletes in transition periods now. And I was like, I don't know what to do with my life. And I know I have a Stanford degree, but like I've focused so much on one thing and my identity as a fencer, I have no idea what to do. So it just felt like a natural fit. And the fencing company itself, or the fencing club, was kind of needed help at the time. And I was like, man, this place was the place I belonged, right? Like this was a community center for me. So I called up my sister, and as the Olympian too, she and I bought and co-owned the fencing club together. And we did, one of the things that we're most proud of that we talk about a lot is we've graduated kids not to become Olympians. That's always the question. Like, hey, how many Olympians have you made? Because you guys are Olympians. I said, no, that was never my focus. My focus was to make good human beings. So I wanted like the parents to be trained, the kids to be trained, bringing in some performance psychology resources, like helping these kids holistically. And we were proud because a lot of them went to D1 schools or D3 schools, and they became captains of their team. So for me, that was like, okay, we're helping make some good human beings here, to be able to be leaders, to be good teammates. I mean, that for us was the focus.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. That's fantastic. I mean, what a cool thing to be able to do. You know what I mean? Not only be able to kind of, just not only the simplicity of just buying the club, but what you just said about being able to develop young men and women, right? And into future, leaders, right? And so that's pretty dope. That's pretty dope. So let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about the athletic journey and that kind of leads to performance psychology. So obviously we mentioned, as at 14 winning the world championship, really the first U.S. fencer to do so. And then just a few years later, you're in the Olympics in 2000, right? But along that journey, you end up becoming an NCAA champion at Stanford, right? And then of course made that Olympic team in 2000. What were some of the, what was that journey like? What was some of the challenges that you faced during that time period? I mean, it might require us to be on the podcast for 2 hours, but what was that journey like? And because one thing that I imagine is when you go to Stanford, and you had an older sister that went to the same place, was an also Olympian. So, are you in the shadows of a sister who's been there? Are the expectations higher because she accomplished what she accomplished, and then you're at a place like Stanford where you walk in. I remember being recruited by Stanford, and I remember they told me when I got to campus, they said, "Hey, if Stanford," and I might get these stats wrong, so nobody fact check me, but if Stanford was its own country, it would be like 8th in the world in like gold medals won, right? So you're surrounded by other Olympians in other sports, some of the brightest students in the world, some of which are tinkering with the world's greatest next app or whatever it might be. So like You take like the experience from, growing up in that elite environment that your mom, parents kind of cultivated. And now you're here on this campus. So like, I know there has to be kind of some adversity woven in there that you had to kind of deal with. Like, tell us a little bit about that journey.
Oh my gosh. They're all the positive things. I'll get those out of the way where, you become accomplished and you understand the nuance of what it takes to do something at a really high level, like how to push myself, how to grind, how to, what kind of discomfort I can feel, just all the things that come with that team, being a good teammate, training, putting in the daily grind. You learn all of those aspects as an athlete. And I do think like as a female, having other females that were really accomplished, I mean, they were all like Ivy League graduates, these women I trained with, and they were always giving me great examples of strong female leadership. So I think those are the things I really, really gained from that. And I just feel like those alpha females really helped me grow. But there's definitely some aspects that were very, very difficult. I, at a very young age, had performance psychologists, a lot of them. And because I was so anxious as an athlete. And I think we have this fallacy like, oh my gosh, this athlete like knows what they're doing. And they're out there and they're like, they used to say to me, they're like, wow, you are like so intense. And like, you just look like you knew what you're doing and had all this confidence. And meanwhile, like, I'm like calling my performance psychologist, like, I'm terrible. I don't know how to do it. Like just completely like melting down. So the reason I'm in this psych health space is I understand what it feels like to be someone who is seen in a certain way as like, you got to be this person. And then in the background, you're like completely sort of melting down and having to handle and do that. So, and as I said, I think there's been a lot of my untraining of some unhealthy habits, given that I had a coach that was really not great. Right. So those things were all part of the journey. And I do think because the confidence, so one of the lessons I've learned, the confidence that I gained was partially me, but also it felt like it was out of fear. Like I had to perform out of fear because I had a coach that was like real rough. And so I never really felt ownership over my performances. I never felt like if I won, it was we won. If we lost, it was I lost. Right. So that kind of toxicity. And so I never internalized my wins. So when people say, oh, you were this or you that, and I was like, I almost have a weird disassociation with that. Right. So because it never was mine. It was always the team's or it's his or it was we. It was never Iris accomplished this. And it never felt real or genuine. So when I went to Stanford, for me, and I've been battling this my whole life, which people don't realize is imposter syndrome, because it was very hard for me to internalize the wins and to say Iris did this or this is what she accomplished. So when I went to Stanford, it felt like a fraud, right? So so many people are so accomplished. It's like really easy to feel that way, right? Like the guy who was the RA in our dorm, like already made a couple $1 million selling some sort of app or whatever it is. Facebook, and then also you're with these athletes, all of these Olympians, and being a fencer, and like, it's kind of a minor sport, not kind of, it is a minor sport. So it just was never enough. So I think like all of those things sort of have culminated to where I am today. But you asked about the journey, but I think that's the consequence of having that toxicity is just not having that ownership, leading to some imposter syndrome. What people can't, sometimes they're like, well, you're so accomplished, I don't understand. And I think people who are really accomplished oftentimes are masking something deeper and can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, because I think a lot of people, and, getting a chance to witness, whether it be my brother, my sister, or just people kind of around them and being close to top performers. I mean, many of them, yes, they've done it because they're talented, but also they've gotten so good at telling themselves a story that works for them.
Yes.
Right. In creating a narrative in their head that they're capable. And they've been doing that for so long that at some point you kind of start questioning, wait, is this narrative actually real? Especially if you start facing some adversity, or you go from transitioning from like the best in the in your age group, or you're at your school or college or your profession, and then Father Time hits and things start changing or whatever. Then you're like, that story I've been telling myself for a number of years, is this even true? Right.
Yes.
And so I think that, the stories in your head, like you have to continue to kind of reinvent that internal ad campaign to kind of combat some of that imposter syndrome, because, you evolve as a person, you evolve as an athlete, you evolve as a salesperson or CEO or a founder or a mother or a father, whatever it might be. And so as you evolve, that internal ad campaign, I think, needs to evolve as well to kind of keep you aligned with everything. And then also when you attach, whatever it is, your craft, to your identity, it becomes it can become really dangerous. Right. And so I think that's can be a challenge. By the way, you mentioned something about fencing and like, not being like a main sport or like a, and
Yes.
I guess that's true. But you know what? They need some NIL money for fencers. Do they? Is NIL money going to fencers? I mean, come on, let's give them some NIL. No.
That's so new to me, and the concept is so new. And I was just reading about that. But yeah, I mean, any money to the fencers. But the fencers now, just not to be like, we're amazing, but my sister and I helped pave a pathway, I think, for the next generation of fencers. We became the first to win or be number one in the world and all those things. So the fencers now, we have a 3-time Olympic gold medalist in Lee Kiefer, and she does get some funding. Not when we were growing up, but I want to double click on something you said, is tying your identity to what you do.
Yeah.
I see it not just with athletes, but I see it with people in professions. You have the, physician, really successful surgeon, right? Worked with those people, executives, where that is their whole lives. And that's how they've tied their identity, and they don't have anything else. Right. And so that really plays into the resilience and the sustainability of you being good at what you're doing, is having other things in your life that anchor you. I know Steve Magnus just wrote something about like going all in, and like the Olympians we talked about, we're like, yes, that's the fallacy. Everyone thinks like, burn the boats, you're not serious unless you just go all in. And you as an entrepreneur probably feel that too. Like people like, if you're not all in every day, all the time, grinding at it, then you're not good enough, and da-da-da. And then you feel like the pressure of like, I know my entrepreneurs feel a lot of pressure from people, funding and sources of funding. So they're like, oh my God, I got to burn all the boats. I got to go all in. I got to go. So I think there is a fallacy of just because you want to do something well, if you want to be really good at something, that you have to be all in, because you just raised something. If your identity is all that and nothing else, then you've really lost your ability to be resilient. You really are going to hit burnout very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you talk about entrepreneurs, I mean, like, social media is, a really powerful tool. Both, it can be positive, it can be negative, as we know, right? And so I've kind of started to strip down all the social media platforms that I'm like actively on. You might see me present on Instagram, but the truth is, and I'm being really honest, like I've hired somebody to actually do the physical posting, only because it keeps me from doing like doom scrolling when I'm in there. So we communicate on what should be posted. We kind of gather together and kind of, like say, this is what I want to put on here. But like, I just have him on that platform to actually execute the post, because I know it's not healthy for me, and at least currently, right? Maybe I'll get back on there one day. Who knows? The one platform that I'm still on and like, actively use is LinkedIn, because, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder, I'm a salesperson, all these different things. And so, but even now this platform is changing, LinkedIn, right? Where because of the algorithm, right? I see a lot of people that are founders and entrepreneurs and building stuff and raising capital and, building tech companies and talking about their annual recurring revenue and talking about, their P&L and their growth and all these different things. There's a lot of founder stories and founder journeys that are happening on there, which is cool. But I find myself like comparing a lot, where I'm like, dang, it's kind of like, how I worry about my 13-year-old comparing what other 13-year-olds are doing on it and on social media, so we don't give it to her, right? Like I'm worried about how toxic that can be. But it's very similar, even as a 41-year-old, founder and CEO. You see these other companies that are, whether they're in your space or not, and most of them aren't in my space. It's just, I'm seeing founders that I know that are supposed to be at the same stage I'm at, that are just like, oh my, growing like wildfire, building their teams, they're an insane number, or hitting certain milestones, and you're like, and so you start to, that imposter syndrome starts sinking in. You're like, man, am I am I good enough at this? Am I making this? Am I working hard enough? Am I going all in? Do I need to spend more hours in the office? Like, what do I what do I have to do to do what they're doing? But it's with such little context. Everybody's telling their war stories, with the waving the flag at the end of the day, saying, "Hey, we won," right? But a lot of people aren't telling that story of like the valleys and the adversity they're facing, and all that stuff. And so it's, I've noticed that about myself recently. It's like, man, like, I have to be really careful about what I'm consuming on this platform, because it starts getting in your head on and kind of inadvertently or subconsciously impacting your decisions you make. So social media is something that you and I really didn't have to deal with a lot, especially like in college and stuff initially. Like, it's taken over, right? And so it's got to impact the athlete now, right? So athletes that you're working with, or even executives you're working with, now it's part of the conversation, I would imagine.
Well, we could go in two different directions. One is, I'd love to know how you're shifting the game in your mind about comparison, because I love to hear it from an entrepreneur's voice. Like, that is so real. We're human beings and we live in a village. Of course, you're going to leave your house and look at the other person's house and be like, that house is bigger, or they got that car, like, that's just who we are. We're human beings. But like, how do we take that aspect? I want to hear from you. I'll put a pin in that. But also, I am weird in that I see some positives in social media, especially for women and so in raising their voice. So I'm happy to have that conversation. But I want to ask you as an entrepreneur, like, how did you change the game of comparison? We all do it. It's a human thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm in the middle of that journey, right? So, I'll give you my take and my advice and kind of what I'm trying to do and what I'm executing on now. And it's very simple. Is I'm trying to find more joy, right? And so that's the ultimate result I'm looking for, because I think that, comparison steals joy, right? And so I'm like, okay, let me work backwards on this. Like, I found myself comparing. I know that comparison steals joy, so I need to find more joy. So then the question is, how do I find more joy, right? And I think one of the answers to that, and it's not the only answer, of course, but one of the answers to this is gratitude, right? Our company, we have a gratitude channel in our kind of Slack, right? And so it's not necessarily mandatory. It's become kind of a standard, that people leverage on the team, leverage that channel to just, type in what they're grateful for today or yesterday or this week or whatever it might be. And it's really neat because, and some people use it more than others. I probably use it. I'm probably in the middle as far as how often I use it. I try to use it authentically. So when I truly feel like I'm grateful for something, I try to plug it in. I don't try to just come up with like random things, but that exercise of gratitude, whether it be organizationally and something that we do or individually, is a really great resource, I think, to kind of mitigate against comparison, because when you can kind of frame up like what you're grateful for in this moment, right? And start to take stock of that and start to kind of build a library of all these things you're grateful for. It's hard to kind of worry about what other people are doing, because in those moments of joy or in those moments of gratitude or in those opportunities of gratitude, like, you're finding joy, right? And so it's just kind of this ability to kind of play ping pong with this comparison a little bit. By anytime I find myself comparing something, it's a good opportunity to say, what am I grateful for, right? Okay, boom, this, and this, and you're like, okay, I'm good, right? And so there's that. And then from a business component, more like kind of, systemically, we should really try to focus on what our mission is, what our vision is, what the facts are. I think this, being part of Limitless Minds, like, talk about neutral thinking a lot. It's not about neutral is not about ignoring, the adversity or ignoring the emotion, right? It's about, actually, it's quite opposite. It's about recognizing that emotion, that negativity, whatever it is, and diagnosing like what that's about, and what that moment is, or what that situation, what happened in the situation, and then quickly reframing it into something that's about not just going straight to positivity, but going right to the facts. Hey, we had a poor Q4 or whatever, right? Okay, why did that happen? What do we know about it? What's the truth? And then what set of behaviors or process can be put in place to reverse that or head the right direction? Now let's do that. Let's focus on those behaviors. We'll worry about the results later, right? And so those are some of the things we do. So like, from a mental fitness or like a mindset, mindfulness perspective, gratitude is fantastic for, I think, mitigating against comparison. And then from the business component as an entrepreneur, sticking to the mission and vision, right? And just sticking to the facts, right? The data, the analytics, and leveraging that to kind of take the next right steps forward, right? And then I guess I'll add one thing. If I see somebody doing really badass stuff, and I'm like, dang, instead of being like jealous or envious of it, maybe pick up the phone or slide into the DM and like say, hey, I would love to pick your brain. I see you doing some good stuff. Like, love to learn. Because when I actually talk to people that appear to be crushing, when I talk to them, and then that might be true, like that one post might be accurate, but they always tell me the other 6, 7, 8 things that have gone wrong, right? Or that they learned from. And so that kind of makes you feel like you're not crazy. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's happening to us too. We just might be we might be a month behind you, or it might be a quarter behind you, or it might be a year behind you. So you just gone through it in a certain way. We're just right behind. We're on your heels, right? And so I know that's a lot, but those are kind of 3 things I think that I'm seeing and trying to leverage and recognizing as, a process of which to combat the comparison challenge that I find myself in sometimes. But it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be easy. When you're striving for something, it's not supposed to be easy. And then the fact that you'll go back and be like, all right, what are some of the tools that I have, and do I need to revamp them? I feel like you just need to clip whatever it is you just said and then just share it with every entrepreneur that's out there, because they need that, right? Because it is hard. It takes so much courage and bravery to go for an Olympic team, to, run a business. And I think we just forget that, right? So I'd love for you to just clip whatever it is you said and let's just ship it out to every entrepreneur. So
yeah. Well, what about for you? I mean, in a lot of different ways. I mean, again, we talked about, you growing up in the same household as another Olympian, being on campus at Stanford, professionally, we'll talk a little about where you're at today, but you're at Deloitte, and so you're around a lot of great talent. It seems like everywhere you've been around like beastly talent, right? So how are you combating comparison, and making sure it doesn't become a cancer, but something that you can kind of leverage as growth?
Yeah, I think that I definitely suffer from that too, right? So I think, like I said, it's very human to think about other people and think, oh my God, their journey is like so, they're doing so well. And social media definitely exacerbates that. But, I think a long time ago, I realized I could use comparison. I was using comparison to keep myself stuck. Mm-hmm. Like if I was scared of doing something, scared of believing in myself, I would compare myself to someone else, and then it would stop me in my tracks. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I was like, I'm not getting ahead because I keep trying to be like, oh, well, she's got this and they've got this and I shouldn't do this because they got these things. And I'm like, whoa. And so I think I realized I was doing it as a safety mechanism. Like, yeah. God, I could keep myself real safe if I just keep thinking everyone else is doing better than I am. So I think at some point I just realized like, whoa, Iris, you're really hamstringing yourself here. You're really allowing this story and narrative, to your point, narrative, to allow yourself not to do the thing that scares you the most.
Yeah.
So I used to know, like, I am terrified of public speaking, actually, like for various reasons, right? And yeah, I know, but you guys hired me to do it and I did it, right? So, but that's for a very long time. I'd be like, well, Henna and Colin, they know what they're doing. It's so great. And they're amazing. And they do these things amazing. And I was like, whoa. And it was interesting. Some conversations with Henna, some conversation with Colin, and conversation with people before. I realized like they believe in me. Then why am I not telling myself that same thing? Right? Yeah. Like Limitless Minds is believing in me. What is keeping me from doing that? So I do think sometimes the comparison is a way for us to stay safe. And that's okay, because sometimes we feel lots of fear and emotion. And I think that's exactly what you're saying is like, we're feeling fear, we're feeling a ton of emotion. We need to look at that emotion, see if it's like relevant. Am I really in danger here? Is there something wrong? Do I not really want to pursue this? Ask yourself some questions. And then once we go through that aspect of like, let's handle the emotion, then we can put it to the side and say, okay, what's really in front of us? Your brother does that very quickly, very well, right? So he's even written, it's in the book too, about how he can be in the moment and say, okay, let me minus the emotion, let me deal with this and then see what's happening and actually happening in front of me. Yeah. So I think that's kind of what you were saying. But for me, that was what was happening, was I was afraid to believe in myself And so comparison was a way for me to keep myself safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's what's interesting is like that safety that everybody's looking for, right? Comfort, safety. There's like, I'm imagining like a cliff, right? Where like you're safe, right? You're safe. And then all of a sudden, like safety turns into self-sabotage, and like that's you falling off like this cliff, right? And so there's this fine line between, kind of talking yourself into safety, because at any moment that becomes self-sabotage, right? Because then, time's a really precious thing. We can't get it back. And so we spend all this time comparing, and then the opportunities passed you by, right? The cliff has come, right? And so I think it's just really, important for people to kind of do some reflection on some of those things they're kind of holding themselves back on, and recognize this like a safety mechanism, which is okay in some cases, but there's got to be a point at which you're willing, your risk, your risk tolerance. You're taking stock of that risk tolerance and trying to increase that incrementally over time. But I think that's I think it's interesting, because I think that one thing that you mentioned that you're working with now is like transitioning. I'm not sure if it's transitioning athletes or just people transitioning from one career to another. Tell me about that.
I've done that, but mostly my focus is on helping athletes transition from sport to normal life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and again, I've seen that particularly with my sister, right? Her identity was in basketball. She played at the highest levels. She went to Stanford, played and won a national championship, went to 4 Final Fours, and then it was just like done, right?
Yes.
Like over. And so,
yes.
So then she's trying to figure out what she's doing next. And actually, we should talk about this like offline, because I think Anna's now getting involved with a company that is working with athletes in the same way. So we should talk about that. But I think that that transition, it can be tough, right? And you've gone through that transition, like everybody does at some point, and many athletes don't. They come to that precipice, like, and it's not under their control, right?
Right.
It's like the dream, if you're an athlete, is to like go out on your own terms, right? But many people go out, whether it's injury or, their skill set diminishes, right? And whoever is putting them on teams or on whatever recognizes that those diminished returns, and they say, hey, it's not for, you're not for this team this time around. And so, like you mentioned, I think you mentioned 2008, you did not make the Olympic team, right?
Right.
Was that, tell me about the transition. Was that it for you, or did you continue to fence, or what was the story at the back end of your fencing career?
Gosh, this is a hard story to tell, but I will tell it. I was diagnosed with PTSD because of abuse, and I had switched coaches, and it came to a point where my psychological health was really at risk. And so I didn't make the team. And so I was not only dealing with having to transition as an athlete, but also dealing with the past parts of my my fencing life. But, I actually think that in the end, it was good, because it pushed me to, we're of the generation where, you just get over it, right? Like, it'll be fine, right? So that's how we did psychological health, was like, it'll be fine. Just, it'll be okay. Like, keep on going,
Stay positive.
Yeah, stay positive. It's all good. So I think actually going through the PTSD journey, which I still am, you always have it, has been helpful, because it really pushed me to say, okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to seek a therapist. I'm going to go through this. And so that really helped me in my transition. So, but it wasn't, I could have, I guess, kept going, but I think it would have been at a detriment of my psychological health. And that's the other thing that's hard, right? It's like, it wasn't like a career-ending journey, career-ending injury. It was my psychological health was at risk. That's kind of
in some ways, and maybe you can consider that a career-ending injury, right? I mean, sometimes you have a number of knee issues to the point where it's not worth getting back on the field or the court or whatever it might be, right? And even though you probably could go back and play, but doctors are like, hey, listen, like, this is the risk is too great, so you want to, so you sunset it, right? I mean, concussions, whatever it might be, and so. I'm not sure that we should think about the psychological piece much different, right? At some point, the endurance level around, what's really healthy for you in the long term is what ends the career, right? And so whether it's psychologically or physically, so maybe you could even argue that in many ways it was kind of an injury, but in a different way. I think that and I think this is a good segue to just the transitioning of your career and getting into coaching and integrated mental health and whatnot. So you've had such a successful fencing career and co-owning the Rochester Fencing Club and with your sister. And, what inspired you to transition into coaching and then even take us all the way to the current role you have at Deloitte, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think after having the experience I had with my coach, one of the things that stuck out to me was, wow, he was very directive, right? Like almost like demeaning directive. And I'm like, there's got to be better ways to get people to their point of success than yelling at them, than berating them, right? Because we grew up in that era. That was pretty normal for coaches. It's like, you just do what I say and I'm the boss, right? And it's the same thing of like old school corporate, probably. I'm probably generalizing, but it was kind of the same thing. It's like your boss says something, you do it, and that's it, and whatever. So I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to train. I started with kids. Like, there's got to be a better way to train kids, right? They come in, they want to do it, they're eager, they need some help. Like, what is their educational journey like? What is their potential journey like? How do I help them reach their potential? How do they help them use the sport as a vehicle for their growth? Like, I just started there. And then after I felt like, wow, these are pretty successful. These kids are doing well. What I'm learning is really working. And so I got an MBA, and I was like, well, I wonder if we can take some of this stuff and then apply it. And the sneaky part is that people would always want me to come speak or to coach them because they're like, she's so successful. She's an Olympian, she's all these things. But I took the knowledge of the other stuff, of like unlearning all the stuff that I learned. Those are the things I actually brought to the coaching conversations that I found really interesting. Like, what about the environment made it hard for me to speak up to my coach? What about the environment made me feel like I was really part of a team? What about myself drove me and motivated me, And so I thought about those things pretty deeply, did a lot of reading, and then joined Valor Performance, where my current boss, it just so happens, Dr. Adam Naylor, is in the performance psychology space. He trained us to become coaches. I got an ICF, and I really enjoyed coaching people. Because it's so wonderful to be a part of someone's journey. And it wasn't like, I always went in knowing this person knows what they want. They know what they're going to do. And gosh, I have the privilege just to help shepherd that and make sure that what they see in the mirror is clearly themselves and what they want to see. And so like that felt like so deeply profound for me. And it still gives me like, I'll leave a coaching conversation. I'll just be like, if I could just impact this one person or be a part of their journey, I feel lucky. And that's it for me. It's good enough for me. It was the only time in my life that it was ever good enough. Everything else I do to the nth degree. I'm like, it's never good enough. But when I coach, it's like such a really interesting place for me. It's almost like, I know this sounds really trite, but like, it's almost like this practice of spirituality. It's like, not to bring that in, but it's like, you're flowing with someone. So being in that flow can feel so good for both people. I'm not in flow with every client. Yeah. Doesn't always happen, but it's wonderful. And I feel very lucky. Yeah. So I just loved that. And I loved, and I was like, wow, but when I'm helping someone, especially I was helping people in the medical field, and it was definitely the pandemic. And I was like, wow, the systems itself, the environment, they're really tough. And no matter what this person does for themselves, they're still within a really hard system. And so then I was like, well, I'd like to experience being part of a larger organization and seeing how they support psychological health and how we can do it successfully. Yeah. And so where I am today in Deloitte, it's a newer program. It's integrated mental health services. There's psychological health services. There's performance psychology. And I'm with a group of people that care about that want to see this, not be just some sort of EAP that we throw at people and, oh, you need some help, here it is. But really, how do we make a concerted effort as a community to make sure that psychological health is part of the fabric of the organization?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm one of the things I'm curious about for our listeners is like, and there's so many, tips and tricks and nuggets and things that people can do, right? And there's of course a lot of things to kind of solve for. Different people are different places, but you know how somebody might ask you, hey, what's on your playlist right now? What's on your playlist? And you're like,
Yes.
let me see. Let's say I'm listening to, I got some country music. I got some Tyler Childers. I got some, I got some, gosh, I got some Bieber. I got some, whatever, right? But like from a playlist perspective, like what for you, from a mindset tool or mindset shift or tactic, what is like one thing that you're vibing on right now? You know what I mean? Like that playlist, like what is one thing you're vibing on right now that's like that maybe you're utilizing, you're coaching a lot of people to leverage?
Oh, so I do CrossFit. And the other day we were in a really difficult workout of the day. And we've talked about my CrossFit. WOD. So, hey, I know I can be intense, but I'm not really that. Like there are many more intense people. But we were doing double unders, and double unders make people crazy because they can't do it, and they're whipping themselves with the rope, and they're getting tired, right? So in the WOD, they're getting tired. And I was coaching them, and I was like, "Don't get frustrated. Get focused. Think of one thing you can handle right now, like one thing you want to work on." And so they started to get focused. I could see their brains going from like all over the place to starting to focus in on what they needed to get done. And at the end, the people that weren't getting double unders, they got one double under. And even when they're exhausted and tired. And I'm not saying like get tired and keep grinding. What I'm saying is oftentimes when we're in the zone of frustration, we will allow comparison, we'll allow negativity. We'll just start, all of these inputs to your brain will start to come together. And then you're like trying to sort through all of them. And so instead of getting frustrated and allowing all that to come in, what is one thing you can focus on? You guys call it like the next best step, right? What's your next best step? And so I think that's sometimes so I would be remiss not to say the world is kind of wacky right now. The United States is a little wacky, however you are voting. And so I think there's this feeling of like overwhelmed with so many things. And this is the thing with social media too, like everything's coming down on you. But what can you get focused on? Where can you start? What's your next best step? So, a little bit of it is stolen from Limitless Minds, but don't get frustrated. Get focused.
I love that. I can use that. Right. I could use that this morning. Like I wish we had this podcast at like 8 and 7 a.m. because I could have used that in my morning of my day. But no, I love that. That's really good. I think that's something that applies to everybody that's listening to this. I mean, and is because I think that we all have those moments where we're facing kind of overwhelmed, where there's just all sorts of shit happening, right? And it also feels like it's snowballing, if you're looking for light in the tunnel. But I love the idea of just like kind of, popping thought bubbles, right? And just focusing on that next right step, right? And so I think that's really good. I like that. I'm gonna use that. Right now for myself.
Well, it's you guys. Next best step. That's the next right step. That's you guys. So I stole it from you and I'm giving it back to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people think that because we have, this company that trains this stuff and we have, world-class coaches and we have all this stuff in the platform and all these different things that like we have all the answers individually, like as a person, but like we're still human beings, right? So negativity does not discriminate, like it is coming for you regardless, because we're unfortunately built to respond to negativity. We have a negativity bias. I too watch the news. I too, have conversations with peers, and I too have 3 daughters that are 12 to 7 years old, right? Like there's a lot of things that are happening that make you want to like feel like you're going crazy. And so I think that, and regardless, nobody, we're not robots over here, and so truly, like I was thinking about that. I was like, yeah, you know what? Like that really applies to me. And try to kind of, certainly juggle a lot of balls and like you mentioned earlier, as an entrepreneur, founder, all the comparison stuff. So yeah, I can subscribe to that for sure.
I think be careful of who you get advice from, right? Like it's like, if you think that you want someone who's just pulled together and looks pulled together, that's probably not the person you always want advice from, right? Like real human beings who are living a real life. Those are the people you want to commune with and talk to. And how are you handling that? You as an entrepreneur, like how are you dealing with comparison, right? So I think we have this thing in the United States, and I'll leave it at this, like you have to be this like, I don't know, put together person to be able to give the knowledge. I think sometimes we just need a community to talk to about, hey, are you feeling that too? Like I'm feeling that too. and I'm trying this out. Are you trying that out? Like if someone's like, I've got the answer and I'm a guru and I'll get you there, be real careful because that's not human experience, right? And that's not how we learn this stuff. We've got to just be a human.
Yeah, you taking me to church today. Like, I agree with that. I love it. Well, listen, before we wrap, you mentioned your podcast, right? Called Untrained, right? And you talked about this concept of unlearning, unlearning toxic habits, etc. I know you have a really great co-host. Tell us a little bit about that podcast, why you started it, and what people can expect on that. Because I think they should go once they listen to this, they should go check out Untrained, and because I know you have some awesome guests on there. I've been kind of checking out, especially the little clips, but listening to some of the podcasts too. So tell us a little about that podcast, why you started it, and what the kind of the goal is with that.
Well, my bestie, as my kids would say, is Whitney Otto, and we wanted a way to take the knowledge and she's also she was a Olympic hopeful for rowing, a world champion of rowing, and she just wrote a book on body image, and so we talk about untraining these sort of toxic behaviors. When we talked about that before, is like these toxic behaviors like overwork or overproducing, or these pieces can keep us trapped. And we often talk about untraining these habits so that you can feel more free, right? Free to do the things you want, to feel more connected to the things you want to do, to be more human, permission to do that. So we did toxic productivity is something that's going to come out. I keep mentioning Isra Nasser. She's amazing, her book. But really, it's a place for us to feel creative, right? And it's a place for us to make sure, the nuggets that we're gleaning from our thought processes, and then also working with clients. And she works with clients. She's an executive coach. And we bring it out into the world because, just we want to help other humans be better humans, right? So that's really the point of Untraining in the podcast for us.
I love that. It's dope. Yeah, y'all got to check it out. Untrained. Whitney Otto, Iris Zimmerman, co-host. Awesome stuff. We got some great guests, so check that out. Hey, you mentioned your kids. So how old are the kids now?
They are going to be 11 and 13. Yeah, girls. It's a fun, you know what it's like.
Man. That's awesome. So are we talking 7th grade and 5th grade, or are we talking 8th grade?
Very good. 7th, 5th. Yeah. It's a wild ride, because also it's not just the kids, but it's also you're dealing with parents too. And that's a whole other day.
Yeah. We had some moments last night or yesterday afternoon with Gracie. Again, she's 12 and a half. She'll be 13 in July. She's 7th grader. It's just like life stuff that there was something that happened that she was really frustrated with her sisters about. And so we pull her aside and kind of, parenting her on being a big sister. But that wasn't really even the issue, right? There was something going on at school, something with some friends. That was the real issue, right? So it's like nothing else, like whether you're a coach or a leader at a company or whatever. A lot of times people's frustrations are people's, acting out or acting a certain way or not showing up a certain way. Oftentimes it's not really the issue at hand. It's some other underlying issue. And that empathy is really required, because we noticed this even with the teams we work with, especially post-COVID or whatever, which seems like yesterday, but it was half a decade ago. The challenge that leaders have today a lot of times is like the empathy with a drive for results, right? Like how do I balance that empathy and also demand a drive for results? Because, today's world is kind of shifted on an axis in a different way. And the old school leadership styles that may exist, again, you mentioned, we might be both generalizing that, but I think it's true, has changed. And so that empathy piece is like so critical to leadership today, whether it be at home, kids and spouses, partners, or whether it be with team members, direct reports, leading up, leading down, et cetera. And so, it's with the teenagers, the preteens, that empathy
no joke.
is so required. It's so required. And because oftentimes if you have the empathy, you kind of find out more. I think my daughters talk to me more in depth, if I lead with empathy versus like the heavy hand, which I sometimes have, So
I can imagine, because the empathy and accountability is a huge part of becoming a leader and trying to figure that out. And it's always like these tensions that you have to handle as a leader, you're always looking at them. You can't just like make a stance. You can work on your values, but things shift, right? So empathy and accountability is a huge tension that leaders have to deal with, and parents have to deal with too. And I think it's interesting because my husband is more of the like, come on, do it, and then I'll be the one like, how do you feel about it, right? So I do understand that there is that tension, but in general, when it comes to teens, the world is hard. The one thing I do is kids never had voice, and not that I'm saying like I'm asking them for permission on everything or what they want or whatever, but like, I don't discount that they have real feelings about something.
Yeah.
Like something really hurts them and they're not just a kid and getting over it. Like you got to stop and ask them like, hey, what's up? Are you okay? I love you. It's all good. Like, are you doing okay? Yeah. I think I don't know. We weren't used to that as kids. Like we didn't have voice. We had to have the emotions of the people that are around us. We're responding to the parents. We're responding to the teachers, what they want. There's never any part of the day they get to just have some modicum of their own voice and control. I think about that. Like think about them waking up in the morning, listening to a parent, then going to school, then having the teacher tell them what to do. And this is constant every day, multiple times a day, multiple times a week. And then they never have a voice. Yeah. And then we're wondering why they're so upset.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a great point. I love it. I'm putting that in the back pocket too. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. By the way, happy Women's History Month. We are recording this in March. And so shout out to the women in my life. And you're one of those people. So I wanted to say that to you. Happy Women's History Month. But thanks for spending some time. We're really grateful for you. Really grateful for you.
I'm super grateful for you guys and the stuff that you're doing. I know it's hard, and I'm so glad you guys are out there. Limitless Minds is awesome.
Yeah, we're doing what we can. But listen, for the listeners, thanks for joining the Limitless Minds podcast. Iris Zimmerman. And remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.